Hey everybody, and welcome to the live cast. You ever have some theme in your life that just all of a sudden pops up and then it keeps coming up over and over in different contexts? Like somebody will ask you about, I don't know, let's say mountain climbing in a meeting, and you'll be like, wow, mountain climbing. Haven't talked about that in a long time. And then a friend will call you up the next hour and say, I'm going off on a mountain climbing trip, and then you just randomly turn on the TV and there's like a show about mountain climbing. You're like, what is going on? What is the universe trying to tell me about mountain climbing? Well, sometimes that happens to me professionally as well. I'll notice that there's a theme, a topic that just all of a sudden pops up. And then I'm talking to people at completely different clients about it that have they're asking me about it, meaning I'm not bringing it to them. And even though they have nothing to do with each other, they don't know each other, the same theme is coming up multiple places. And so over the last couple of weeks, I've had that happen to me on a topic. And I thought I would talk about it because clearly it seems to be a pattern right now. And I'm not quite sure why. I have actually one possible theory, and I don't know if it's true or not. But so the theme I want to talk about today is what I call, I'll go to this one here, Ideation Bullies. Ideation Bullies. So in our work, whether you're developing digital products or just trying to do ongoing digital optimization of a website or an app, or you're responsible for a large-scale digital transformation, coming up with ideas is almost always an important part of success. Certainly not the only part of success. Ideas have to be effectively executed in order to be worth anything. But nevertheless, having the right idea is extremely important. And honestly, one of the things I talk about in my book, Winning Digital Customers, is that ideas exist in pyramids, meaning whatever it is you want to do, there may be a high-level idea. Let's create a new bill payment feature for our banking website that allows people to automatically scan a bill with their phone, and it'll extract all the information from it so they don't have to set up the payee. They can just take a picture of the bill and pay it. Well, that's a cool idea, but underneath it, there probably have to be a whole bunch of additional ideas, meaning, what's the user interface going to look like? How are we going to tell the customer how it works? How are we going to train someone on how to use it? How are we going to let them know about it? How's the technology actually going to function? What's going to happen if there's a problem? And each of these questions, each of these problems to solve, requires more ideas. So it's very often driving towards success in the types of work that we all do is not just about having the one idea, but having not only a bunch of discrete ideas to drive to success, but each of those ideas really needs a whole bunch of ideas under it in order to really be fully executed. So ideas are really important. And very often, one way we create ideas is some sort of brainstorming activity. It may be bringing people together in a meeting, or these days on a Zoom or a conference call. It may be done in a forum or on a Google Doc or in some other method. But the issue, the theme, the mountain climbing of my last couple of weeks has been, and I use this term, my clients aren't using this term, what I call ideation bullies. In other words, someone says to me, I want to bring everyone together, but there's this one person, and I just feel like, they're not going to let anyone else talk, right? They have an idea of how it should be done, whether it's the technology that should be used or the user interface that should be created or what color everything should be, whatever it is. And they are so sort of insistent about it that it's almost not worth having a session because nobody has the energy or the desire to fight with this person. And so it just puts everyone in a bad mood. And by the way, that's critical for ideation, right? The way you engage people's creativity is by getting them in a great state, getting them awake and energetic and alert and excited and ready to go and enthusiastic and frankly having fun. And if everyone feels like there's someone in that meeting, or maybe even a couple people in a meeting who are just going to gang up on everyone who comes up with an idea that isn't the idea that they're pitching and promoting, that's just going to kill the whole thing, right? And so this is the problem in different flavors and different varieties that I've been hearing from a number of clients over the last few weeks. And again, I have a theory about where all this bullying behavior may be coming from. I don't know, but I'm not even going to state my theory since we'll keep this show apolitical, and I could even be wrong. But in any case, in all seriousness, it's a phenomenon that I've seen going back for decades, where we will do big workshops. Many of you know we have a facility in Manhattan called the Innovation Loft, where we often bring together large, corporate groups for multi-day offsite sessions. And in planning those sessions, one of the things we always think about is, what are the risks? What could go wrong? And one of the questions we always look at is, well, are there troublemakers, right? Are there people in the group that could be, could throw a monkey wrench into everything we're trying to do. And if so, how are we going to overcome that? What are we going to do about it? So what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit more about this problem and then give you 10 specific tactics that we use, because this is a completely diffusable problem. If you look at the tactics that I'm going to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so, you don't need all of them. You can pick just a few of them, even depending on your situation. And I'm confident that you will find that you can master handling folks like this so that they can potentially still have their say, but it doesn't throw a monkey wrench into everything you're trying to do in terms of coming up with great ideas. And by the way, it's possible that that person who's so passionate and so insistent that everyone listen to their idea, it's possible that they're right. That could be the best idea. So of course you want that idea. And it's of course also possible that they're extremely influential. And if you don't give them the opportunity to really thoroughly express their idea, your project is not going to get the alignment that's necessary or the political support that's necessary for it to be successful. So we usually can't ignore these folks. Sometimes you might be able to. Well, anyway, we're going to go over 10 tactics. Now, before I do, though, I just wanted to share a couple of funny acronyms that I just learned in the last 3 days. And I learned them as part of one of those mountain climbing experiences. In other words, one of the multiple places where this topic has come up for me is in a networking group. I have a group called the Digital Leaders Lodge, and it's all very, very senior, like a CXO level executives from top brands. And we all get together once a week for a Zoom call and just talk about issues and things that we're faced with and challenged. And it's a mastermind kind of networking group where we all just have an opportunity to talk to peers and colleagues about what we're challenged with and what we're facing around digital marketing, those types of topics. So we weren't really trying to talk about this topic. We were talking about a broader topic of design thinking. But this issue came up, and so I learned a couple of fun acronyms that I thought I'd share with you. And it's what it is it's part of a way of describing some of the people that can be problematic. So the first acronym that I learned, hang on, I got to switch tabs here. The first acronym that I learned was a zebra. A zebra. Now, I never heard this. Have you heard this before? Put in the chat if you've ever heard this acronym, a zebra. And a zebra is somebody who's in a meeting who has zero evidence, but they are really arrogant. That person who's like, this is the way to do it. Our customers only want it this way. They have no customer research to back that up, but they're just so certain. And, there's a principle that they teach, in psychology and in persuasive messaging, which is sometimes the person with the strongest feelings about things can seem the most persuasive. Sometimes people are thinking, well, I think this is the right way to go, but of course I'm not sure. And of course, if we have a sense of humility, which I think we should always have when we approach any kind of ideation or product development, let's face it, lots of products that are launched by perfectly confident people turn out to be unsuccessful. So I think we always have to have a sense of humility. And if you're one of those people that has that extremely valuable sense of humility, but then someone comes along who sounds passionate and absolutely certain, sometimes it can cause you to say, well, gosh, I do think this is the right way to go, but I can't say I'm 100% positive. And that guy seems like dead set on absolutely being certain that's the way to go. That can be fairly persuasive, even if they honestly don't know what they're talking about. So anyway, so that's one fun acronym. I don't know if this is useful to actually use. I'm not suggesting you call people a zebra and tell them this acronym. So anyway, I'm just sharing it because I really found it delightful, because of course it's a good characterization of one of the challenges that we have. So that's acronym number one that I just learned. I thought I'd share. The zebra, the person with zero evidence, but extremely arrogant. And interestingly, the other acronym that I learned was, I can't remember which member had brought up zebra, but a colleague of mine, Bob Taylor, brought up another acronym, which I'd also never heard, which is HIPPO. Now, I put in the chat also if you've heard this acronym before, because I never have. HIPPO is the highest paid person on hand. Right? And of course, this is another challenge with ideation, right? Which is if you get in a room with people, and if the most senior person says, well, I think we should go left, there's a risk that everyone is going to go, well, yeah, sure, left, absolutely. I support that 100%, whether they do or not. And then, of course, you potentially lose the opportunity to do what you're really trying to do, which is hopefully acronyms, those two zoological acronyms of zebra and hippo. But they're just a fun way of characterizing a couple of the specific sub-varieties of people who can be ideation bullies. Of course, not just because you're the highest paid person doesn't necessarily mean you're a bully, but you can be if you come in there and you don't even need to be as arrogant to do it, right? If you're the extremely arrogant person or extremely confident person, but of course that wouldn't be zebra, so arrogant. But you can sometimes sort of bully out other people's ideas just with your arrogance or your confidence. But when you're the highest paid person in the room, sometimes you can speak with a small voice and just say, well, I'm not sure, but I think it should be X. And that's enough, depending on the culture of your company, and frankly, depending on you as an individual leader and how people perceive you, to make people feel like it's not their place to contradict you. So let's talk about those techniques, right? So those are some fun acronyms. So here are some techniques to deal with ideation bullies. Now, technique number one may not be practical in every situation, but when you're going to bring people together to come up with ideas, you very often have the opportunity to choose your participants. And if somebody is known to be a troublemaker of one sort or another, or you predict that that person is going to try to tank the effort to bring people together and generate ideas, maybe don't invite them. And if their ideas are important, there's always an opportunity to give them input in another way. Ask them to send you a list of their ideas or whatnot. Again, sometimes there, as I mentioned earlier, there can be downsides. If that person is politically very important, then excluding them may not be possible. But I'll throw it out there as number one, because it's the easiest and most obvious. You've got a problem person, don't involve them. Let's move on, though, in part because, like I say, that may not be workable, depending on who it is, their role, how important they are, etc. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, they also may have great ideas, right? So you don't want to lose the benefit of their ideas. The second is to align on the goals of the meeting. Sometimes people who are trying to throw out ideas are throwing out, and who are trying to be ideation bullies, aren't even on the same page of what you're there to ideate about. For example, you might say, well, we're here to have a session to come up with a tagline for our new advertising campaign. And you've got somebody who comes in and says, you know what? I don't even think we should be advertising. I don't even think we should be doing any marketing. I have a totally different idea about how I think we should be bringing our product to market. Well, that's great. It's always good to get that kind of feedback. But if the purpose of the meeting is to come up with taglines for your advertising campaign, then that's really taking you off topic, right? And so one of the things I always like to remind people in any given session of any sort is, hey, there's a lot of important things in the world. And one of the ways we tackle it is to break it into pieces and say, right now, for this time, for this 90 minutes or however long the meeting is, we're here to focus on this. So anything that's not part of this topic, we don't want to use this time for that. And that is not a judgment that other thing is not important. World hunger is important, but we're here to talk about the tagline for our, Halloween sale, right? So let's just focus on that for the next 90 minutes. We have the whole rest of our lives to focus on all those other important things. You can have fun with it, be upbeat about it, but just remind people that we're here. We want to use this time for one specific thing because we want to accomplish something, right? If we try to tackle too much in 90 minutes, we can't boil the ocean, but we can solve this one thing. So make sure everyone understands what the definition of victory is. And hopefully that at least sets some ground rules so that if people start to pull you off topic, again, you can be respectful of the point that they're making and not say, oh, don't be ridiculous. Of course we have to do advertising, but simply, that's a great point. But in this meeting, what we want to accomplish is X. So it would be great if we could try to get that accomplished. And hey, listen, if we get all of that accomplished, 70 minutes into a 90-minute meeting, and we've completely accomplished our mission and goals, then we'll have some extra time. And if you want to talk about other stuff, then that's great. That'll be extra credit. But until we've got a good tagline for the ad campaign, let's just stay on that. So that may work. Now, it may not always work, right? If somebody's really a bully, they might say, well, I hear you, but listen, sometimes you got to break the rules. And, I still think that we should focus on X, Y, and Z, right? So this is why I have 10 techniques for you, right? I can't guarantee you that any one of them is going to work. But if you have all 10 in your arsenal, the odds are that one of these nets is going to get the ideation bully and neutralize them. Another is to create a culture in your ideation session and to say, hey, listen, guys, and this is sort of goes to that HIPPO point. This is really a leave rank at the door type session, right? We have people here at different levels, but we really want to get everyone's ideas and thinking. And of course, if you say that and there's people that are senior to you in the meeting, that may not be completely believable. It's always best coming from the most senior person in the room, frankly, from the HIPPO, letting everybody know that we really want everyone's ideas. And also, it's another reason why it's often good to let that person speak last and to coach them separately, to coach them offline, maybe before the session. Of course, if someone's senior enough, maybe you don't want them in the meeting. Maybe you want to tell them, hey, listen, what we'd like to do is get the group brainstorming. And you can be blunt and say, listen, if you're there, it might be harder for people to feel like they can just freewheel it and come up with ideas. So why don't you wait, let us have the session, and then we'll bring you the results to assess, assuming if that's sort of the stakeholder that this is coming to. That's one strategy. Another strategy is to, help them be a participant and say, listen, it's going to be best for you, for everybody, to get the maximum range of ideas. So if you can wait and speak last, we'll probably get a lot richer ideas in the room. Because again, sometimes no matter what you say, even if you're a really nice guy or woman and you try to say you want everyone to give their own ideas, once you've spoken, it can be hard for people to feel like they should contradict you. It can feel politically risky. Another is insight before ideas. So one of the little sort of sayings that we use in our workshops sometimes, and it comes from a whole tradition of workshops from Matt and Gail Taylor, is everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own set of facts. And depending on what you're there to come up with ideas about, there usually are some facts that are helpful to drive the ideation. For example, if you're talking about whether you should stock your stores with larger sizes than you're currently stocking them with. And someone says, well, like 50% of the people who come into our stores are size XXL or larger, and we don't even have anything for them. Okay, if that's really true, then that's pretty persuasive, but is it true? So what's good to do is to say, well, what is it we're coming up with ideas for? What's the problem that we're ideating around? If, for example, let's go back to the ad campaign example before. Maybe we should have some insight about what our current campaign is and how customers respond to it and what our competitors' campaigns are. In other words, you want to seed people with information beforehand. Now, that's a good thing to do for many reasons. For people to come up with good ideas, it's helpful for them to have the information. But how does that relate to ideation bullies? Well, one way that people bully during ideation is they come in with supposedly their own set of facts, which may or may not really be facts. But if someone walks in and says, I think we should do this because, I don't know, iPhone is 90% of the marketplace and Android is only 10% and shrinking. And therefore, I think we should do this one iPhone only feature. Well, they've got those supposed facts, which of course that's totally false. And nobody else has the real facts. It's very easy to bully people with fake facts when others don't have them. So now that doesn't totally neutralize that because you're not going to have every insight, every piece of information. But nevertheless, thinking about what's the key information that the group should be fed in advance and say, hey, listen, these are the facts that we're going to use. These are the sales trends or whatever they may be that we're going to use to drive our thinking. That takes away one of the tools that ideation bullies sometimes use. All right, we're halfway there. Number 5 is what I call the Linus Pauling frame. So if you don't know who Linus Pauling is, he's a Nobel Prize winner. He actually won 2 Nobel Prizes, so clearly a show off. But in addition to that, he's somebody who knew a lot about coming up with good ideas. And he's famously quoted as saying, the best way to have a great idea is to have a lot of ideas and throw most of them away. And I agree with that as well. I think that one of the things you want to think about when you're coming up with ideas is how do you come up with lots of ideas? So if the ideation bully comes in and says, I've got the answer, I know the answer is X, and wants to drown out everybody else. One strategy is to say, all right, well, before you even started brainstorming, you should introduce this idea of our goal in this meeting is to generate the maximum number of ideas, or we need to generate at least a dozen ideas, or depending on how long the meeting is and what the topic is, maybe it's more or less. But you've defined a goal initially of generating a large number of ideas. That way, if someone comes in and says, we should do X, we should create an app, it should do this, it should do that, I know exactly what it should be, I've got the answer. It's easy to say, that's awesome. Write that down. Fantastic. That's one of the ideas. Now, team, we need 11 more ideas, right? We're not rejecting that idea in any way, shape, or form. We're just acknowledging that our goal is to create a whole bunch of different ideas so that we can later assess them and evaluate them. And if that person says, but you don't need any more ideas, that's the one idea, then you can go back again to number 2, the goals of the meeting. Well, our goal is to come up with 10 or 12 ideas, and then we're going to assess them all. And of course, if your idea is really the best idea, then we'll probably wind up picking it, right? But we've kind of agreed that the process is first, we're going to come up with more ideas so we can weigh all the ideas. And is it possible that someone would come up with an idea that has advantages that idea doesn't have? I mean, it's hard to argue no, right? It's hard to argue that some theoretically undefined idea couldn't possibly be worth considering in addition to their idea. So with that frame, what I call the Linus Pauling frame, the point is we need a lot of ideas. So once their idea is out, we don't have to argue about whether it's the best one because our focus right now is just to come up with more. Number 6 is the possibility frame. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the Linus Pauling frame. And it's actually what I just touched on a moment ago. In other words, nothing's impossible. So you can always say to somebody, is it possible there's another idea? Is it possible there's a better idea? Is it possible there's a way of improving on this idea? And it's very difficult, even for a bully, to say, absolutely not. They just have to basically be willing to down and out insult every single person in the room if they want to say, there's not a single person in this room that could possibly come up with an idea that's better than that. Usually in most kind of corporate environments, someone is not going to go that far. And so all they can do is kind of sit there and be like, yeah, what can I say? Anything's possible. And then again, when you're trying to come up with more ideas, and then you acknowledge that it's always possible that there's another idea, a better idea, a way of improving the idea, you sort of diffused their ability to say, I don't think we need to come up with any more ideas. I think we just need to move forward and talk about how to implement my idea. Number 7 is the hypothesis frame. So, by the way, when I say frame, I want to make sure that doesn't seem like a weird word to everybody. A frame is just a way you set something up as a context for a discussion. So, for example, if I come to you and I say, we have a very serious problem we need to talk about, that's a frame. And then I'm going to tell you what the problem is. But I've set it up as it's a very serious problem. Versus if I come to you and I say, we have a really interesting challenge that we need to work on together. Now, that's also a frame, and it's obviously quite different, but you could imagine probably how the very same topic that might need to be discussed could be framed up as a very serious challenge or an interesting problem to solve. And so that's what I mean by a frame. And so here we're just saying there's different ways of kind of putting context around what you're trying to do with the ideation, if that makes sense. So a hypothesis frame just says that we need to acknowledge that any idea is just a hypothesis. In other words, hopefully we've identified a problem and we know what we're trying to accomplish, right? This is, of course, a key objective in any kind of ideation. What's the goal, right? Let's go back to our advertising tagline. Our goal is to make people know that we have the juiciest steaks in all of, Chicagoland, and that our restaurant is elegant. And that's our goal in writing a tagline. We want a marketing tagline that lets people know that our elegant restaurant has the juiciest steaks. So then someone says, okay, here's my hypothesis. My hypothesis is X. And then I'm not going to try to come up with a tagline for that off the top of my head. And so is it going to work or not? I don't know. Let's get more ideas. It kind of goes along with that Linus Pauling frame. It says every one of those ideas is a hypothesis. But one of the reasons I want to separate it from the Linus Pauling frame, meaning we don't know for sure if it's going to work. And in fact, one of the next steps, if we structure ideation, one of the things that you want to do is say, okay, well, first let's get as many ideas as we can. That's the Linus Pauling frame. And then let's try to identify for each of those ideas, what information do we have that might suggest that it would or would not be the right answer? And that's where you start to get to the hypothesis, right? In other words, you're sort of defining that every idea is a possible solution, a hypothesis. It's just a theory that it might be the solution to the problem. And then we're going to want to go back and say, well, what makes us think that? What makes us think that this tagline should work? For example, maybe I have my first tagline and I say, well, one of the things I think that's likely to make this work is it's short, and short taglines are good. And another thing is it rhymes, and rhyming taglines are good. But it uses a really big word that a lot of people might not understand. Okay, well, these are all different informational points about that hypothesis that might suggest whether it would or wouldn't work. And ultimately, usually in our work anyway, a lot of this is going to wind up going to some kind of a testing, which is user testing or some kind of market research, which is a sort of a scientific way of saying, hey, I have a hypothesis that this tagline might work, and now I'm going to actually test my hypothesis with customers. Obviously, not all ideas are tested with customers. Depends on what you're ideating. But there's many ways to test things depending on what it is. If it's an idea for how to speed up the server, you're probably not going to test that with customers. You may actually try it on some servers or whatever. Point is that when you accept the hypothesis frame, it inherently means that whatever idea you have, you don't know for sure that it's going to work. You never know until you test it. You might think that there's a lot of reasons to think it's going to work. Great. We want to get those reasons down because we want to support that person. When the bully has a goal. One of the principles that I think is really good to think about when you're dealing with people is whatever people do, they do with some positive outcome in mind. Now, it might not always seem that way because they might be behaving like a jerk, right? But even the person who's behaving like a jerk is doing it for some positive reason. I'm at least suggesting to you that that is a good way of thinking about it. I can't prove to you, let's call it a hypothesis. I can't prove to you that it's always true. but it's a useful way of thinking about it. Because if you think about things that way, you will likely come up with better solutions. In other words, if you say, well, this guy's just a jerk, well, how are you going to fix that, right? You're not going to make him not a jerk. You don't have a de-jerk magic wand. But if you think, well, wait a minute, this person feels very strongly about this idea, and they really want to make sure we understand the idea. And frankly, they want to give this idea the best chance of being the one that gets chosen. So with the hypothesis frame, first of all, we want to encourage them, of course, to get their idea out. We're not trying to stop them from saying their idea. We're just trying to stop them from preventing everybody else from saying their ideas. So with the hypothesis frame, we're basically saying to them, okay, what is your idea? And then at the right point in time, what are all the reasons why you think this is a great idea? And what are all the reasons why you think this idea might have some sort of flaw or problem? And then we also do that for all the other ideas. So if this person really thinks their idea is the best idea, then not only are we inviting them to identify all the good things about their idea, but at the right point in the ideation, maybe you kind of break it into phases, right? First, we come up with all the ideas, then we take a little break, and then we come back and we assess the ideas. We also want their thinking about what might be challenges or problems with the other ideas. And likewise, we want everyone in the room to be doing that same thing. Because frankly, like I said before, they could be right. And if they've got a lot of energy around their idea being the best, they may do a really great job of identifying problems and challenges in some of the other ideas. And you want that information because frankly, even if you go pick one of those other ideas, usually what winds up happening with ideas is you iterate them and improve them over time. And as I mentioned, you build a pyramid under them. So if they've identified problems in the other ideas, and then you wind up choosing one of those other ideas, those problems that they've identified are useful because they might be right about some of them. And there may be steps you can take to improve that idea to overcome those problems and make it even more likely to be successful. So that's the hypothesis frame. It kind of builds on the Linus Pauling frame, moving from just when you generate lots of ideas to how you think about evaluating and prioritizing and assessing them. Because you kind of have a situation where an ideation bully is neutralized by some of these early tactics into letting everyone say their ideas. So they're like, fine, mine is the best idea, but if you want to let everyone else say all their other bad ideas and you want to put them up on the whiteboard, I will sit here while you do that. I will humor you. But then when you take a break and you come back and then you say, okay, we've got 12 ideas. Now, which 2 do we think are the ones that we should move forward with? The ideation bully kicks back in and then says, all right, I let you write all those ideas up on the board. Now, let me tell you why you should throw all of them away except for mine. And by the way, I may be exaggerating this a little bit. Not every ideation bully is a 10 out of 10. These are tactics that can be implemented at different levels. So I'm taking an extreme example, maybe a caricatured example to show you how this works, but you'll probably see more subtle examples of this in lots of different situations because people feel passionately about ideas that they believe in. And as I mentioned earlier, if you look at their behavior, not as a meaning to be harmful, even though it may be harmful and needs to be neutralized, but behavior that's driven by a desire to make the project successful and make the project adopt what they believe is the best idea, you can at least have some empathy with them. But of course, that doesn't mean that you don't need to still manage them so you can get the benefit of a broader set of ideas. So the last couple, evidence quantity per idea. So that just means that for the hypothesis frame, we want to identify all the evidence and see how much evidence we have for each idea. I described this earlier, really, the process of going through each idea as you're prioritizing and evaluating and getting that evidence. So I spoke about this already. Number 9, use breakouts to avoid filibusters. So when you have a group that's more than, let's say, 5 or 6 people, let's say you have 10, 12, 15, 20, or even more people that are ideating, it can be good to break people into teams and say, hey, we're going to take 30 minutes. We're going to break into 2 teams or 3 teams or 4 teams. Each team is going to brainstorm about this, and then we're going to come back together, and each team is going to share what they've come up with. And that can be also a helpful way of if you have somebody who tries to sort of use all the air in the room, they're going to try to bully everybody and make everybody listen to them and not follow kind of the rules. Well, at least if you put them in breakouts, they can only do that with part of the group. It may not solve the problem 100%, but at least then, you have 3 groups or whatever it is, and those groups don't have that person in them. So at least they can be productive. And then, of course, hopefully some of these other strategies will help manage that person in the breakout that they're in. But now you've at least narrowed the size of the total group that they can actually bully, at least in terms of getting the ideas out. And number 10 is to create structures with timing and turns. So for example, if you do like a Shark Tank type idea pitch process and you tell everyone, hey, you've got 3 minutes to come up. You've got to tell us what your idea is, why it's going to work. There's a timer. And, one of the things I put Nerf guns there on the slide, because one of the things we like to do to make these things fun is we'll do something like each person gets 2 minutes to tell their idea or whatever it is, and we'll give everyone else Nerf guns with those little Nerf darts. So when the buzzer rings, if you're still talking, we hit you with the Nerf darts, right? And so, of course, everyone loves to do that. It's making fun. It's making kind of an enjoyable team building activity. It's also reminding the person that they've really got to stop talking, right? But it's doing it in a way that's not mean or not bullying them or not demeaning them, because it's in a spirit of fun. Nevertheless, that person still kind of has to stop talking at that point because everyone's hitting them with Nerf darts. So it's just another way of trying to make sure that people don't take up all the air in the room. And it goes back to aligning on the goals of the meeting. It's goals on the agenda, right? If you say, hey, here's how we're going to do it, instead of us just having a freewheeling conversation, which is easier for someone to take over and dominate, there's this structure where everyone kind of waits their turn and has their say. But then there's a process of making sure that that's time boxed and move on to the next person. That's another way of making sure that each person gets their time, and that the person who otherwise would want to bully everybody, it's harder for them to do it because there's some rules. And if they totally won't follow the rules, well, at a certain point, again, someone could do that. But in most corporate environments, if you go it's one thing to dominate a conversation. It's another thing to be unwilling to follow the rules of a kind of a game-like structure. So that can be a powerful way of using kind of gamification to also make it harder for someone to bully. Okay, so that's it. 10 strategies to help you deal with your hippos and your zebras and other types of ideation bullies. So hopefully this has been helpful. And I want to remind you that if you have any questions about this content, you are welcome to post them on whatever platform you are watching on, whether it is Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or something else, or we may have posted this video, and we will try to get to them. And in addition, if you have any other questions of things that you would like us to cover on our live cast, we have on a number of occasions taken live casts to cover questions from you, our viewers. So feel free to do that. And I also do want to remind you that my book, Winning Digital Customers, is out and available. It was a Wall Street Journal bestseller and is not only purchasable on Amazon, but you can get the first chapter for free by going to wdc.ht/free chapter. And I am also now doing a weekly podcast. We've been interviewing some really awesome people, all digital transformation leaders from different large companies, including places like Foot Locker, the NFL, Google, and some other great ones coming up that we're getting ready to record. So you can get to the main directory, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, of the podcast at wdcpodcast.captivate.fm. And I think that will then tell you, you can click there to get to if you want to get it on Spotify or iTunes, or you can just go directly to whatever place you get your podcast from and search for the Winning Digital Customers podcast, and it should come up. If it doesn't, let us know. We'll try to make sure it's there. But it is in the vast majority of places where you can get podcasts. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Hopefully this content has been useful, and you take care of those bullies. You don't let them get away with it. Talk to you soon.